Rose of Sharon, the name that brings with it a fragrance. Lord, come and take your revered place. Good evening, friends and family. We welcome you to this Bible study, and let's take off from where we left the last time we met. Our title was, Is Rapture an Escape from the Coming 7 Years Tribulation? And I had a note in my WhatsApp, a doctor friend had sent to us, that they have now learned about the rapture, and they believe in it, and they are waiting for it. And is it enough? Or there are things that they've got to do more in terms of preparation. So that happens to be my title of the Bible study today. How to be prepared for the coming rapture. And I'm not going to give you just 7 points and 1, 2, 3, 4, but let's go into the Bible and see what Jesus Christ has actually taught us through parables. Especially, we know that when Jesus speaks a parable, it's because he wants to, it's a dark saying, right? He doesn't want everybody there to understand, but later he would teach it to his disciples. So every time he speaks about the second coming, he is actually talking in parables, because many were there who wouldn't accept him as the Messiah during his first coming. So how are they going to believe in the second coming? So that's why you find a lot of second coming stories in parables, right? We're going to do nearly 4 parables today and draw from it the lessons that we can from the understanding of these 4 parables. So without wasting time, I would like to get into the first parable, the parable of the 10 virgins, right? And it's in Matthew chapter 25, verses 1 to 13. Sadly, we can't go through this whole chapter. I'm sure all of us have read this before, and we know the story that the 5 foolish virgins were not able to make it to the wedding, and only the 5 wise ones were able to lead the procession to the father's house, the father of the bridegroom. So we need to know some background if we need to understand this parable, because this is based on a Jewish wedding. A Jewish wedding takes around 7 days. The maids that are waiting, the bridesmaid and the bride, never know when the bridegroom will come. A similar situation to us that Jesus is able to draw parallelly. We don't know exactly when Jesus is going to come. So we need to be waiting. We need to be ready. And I want to use one of the terms used by one of my favorite Bible teachers, David Pawson. He doesn't just call it plain waiting, but he calls it active waiting. It sounds like an oxymoron. You can't be active and you just can't be sitting waiting, right? But there are things that we need to do before Jesus actually comes. Now, in this Jewish wedding, as I said, unexpectedly, the bridegroom would turn up, and the bridesmaids and the bride needs to be always on their toes, looking out as to when he is coming. And what is the purpose? What is the event here? Here, the bridegroom comes to pick up the bride and to take her to his father's house. Very similar like how Jesus is going to come and take the bride. We, the church, is waiting for the rapture and take us back to the house of the Father, that is heaven. So you see the similarity here because it's based on the Jewish way of conducting a wedding. Now, what is going to happen now? They are all waiting, and there is a calling here that we find on the 10 virgins. It can be related to our lives as well. All of us have a different calling of God, but God is just looking out to see whether we fulfill our calling, whether we are able to fulfill the purpose we have been called, we have been brought into this world. That is what it's about, doing the will of God that we read in Matthew chapter 7, that whoever does the will of the Father will be able to enter heaven. So how this is related? These 10 virgins have a calling in their life. Now, the first thing is they need to be holy. They need to be virgins, where there is no stain of any man upon their lives. And they have to keep themselves holy at the time of the coming of the bridegroom. It's not that being holy for a certain period, but leading a holy life every day. So, my first lesson that I could draw from this parable, which I want to leave it with you, is practice holiness every day. It's not something that we remind ourselves, it's not something that remains as head knowledge, but we learn to live a holy life one day after day, every day, and always expecting to keep us holy to receive Jesus Christ. So that's my first point. And I also want to remind you with two more verses. That's in Hebrews chapter 12, verse 14. So I'll ask Shanta to read that. Just a reminder to us as we move forward.
Pursue peace with all people and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord.
And that's what, without which we cannot see the Lord. So without being holy, without practicing holiness every day, and the day Jesus Christ comes, if we mess up our holiness, it's likely that we might be left behind. So it's not like a knowledge of holiness, it's a life of holiness. Now we go to another verse in Revelation 22, when Jesus' words, he talks, that's all the last chapter, that's what he tells us.
He who is unjust, let him be unjust still. He who is filthy, let him be filthy still. He who is righteous, let him be righteous still. He who is holy, let him be holy still.
So there is no limit for holiness. So one day the Lord put this thought in my mind. It was just a little axiom. Holiness has no finish line. You can never say, I'm holy enough. This is enough for me, because God is so holy. So this is something that there is no finish line at all. We have to keep out working out our holiness just as we keep working out our salvation. Right? So that's the first lesson that I want to leave with you this evening, that we should practice holiness every day. From there, let's go to the second part. What I'm going to tell you is we need to be prepared. How do we need to be prepared? That's the very topic of the Bible study. Now, I need to explain to you, once again, going back to the parable of the virgins. Now, the virgins were called to do their job. What was their job? They need to have the lamps burning bright. They need to have checked out the oil and the wick. And with all that, with their beautiful, whatever is their garment, they would have to walk before the bride and the bridegroom, right? Because, and always note, this particular thing takes place only after the sun sets, when it is dark. So the roads are dusty, the roads are rugged. So we need somebody to hold a torch or to show a candle. Or, as we see in this story, it's all about lamps. So all these 10 virgins are supposed to light up the place as they move forward, followed by the procession of the bride and the bridegroom. Now the calling of these people, these 10 virgins, apart from keeping themselves holy, being virgins, their calling was to make sure they lead the procession, having enough oil, and then leading it to where? The bridegroom's father's house. And we find here the very purpose they came, they were not able to fulfill it because something went wrong. Always remember, every time Jesus talks about a story of his second coming, it's inevitably it says, and he was delayed, and he was delayed. Sometimes delay, is a kind of a test, like we even see in the life of Saul. Because Samuel came and he was delayed, God was waiting to see whether Saul would wait to do the will of God. But Saul couldn't wait, and that's why he fell. So it's all about waiting to do the will of God. Here, these people came, but ultimately, they couldn't make it into the wedding. So how sad it is that we keep waiting, that we are holy, but in the last moment, we are left behind. We need to fulfill the will of God in our lives. That is the preparation. The 5 virgins desired and worked hard and waited for him. In the end, they could not lead the procession. So that's what God is teaching us through this little parable. We could have been holy, but the day He's coming, we have to remain holy and also make sure that we have done everything to have fulfilled the will of God. And third point, or the third lesson I can draw from the same parable, is about preparation. So let me tell you this. Preparation is an individual discipline. I have to prepare. My calling is different. Likewise, my wife has to prepare. Her calling is different. Now, God is looking at each one of us. How are we preparing ourselves? How are we disciplining ourselves? Are we really keen to get caught up in the rapture? So we need to really keep our minds focused on doing the will of God and using every day in our life as a preparation time for the coming rapture. And it is an individual discipline. It's not something we can go and borrow at the last moment, right? Oh, I'm not prepared. Can you give me this? Can you give me that? Can we buy some? No way. It's all about preparing ourselves daily, keeping ourselves holy daily, preparing ourselves every day to do the will of God, and finally preparing ourselves and making it as a discipline, having this daily in our life, waiting to fulfill the will of God. So I think I have paraphrased this whole parable, because if I go into detail, this one parable will take 40 minutes because there's lots there, but I have compressed it and given to you what is actually necessary for us, because I'm going to the next parable. The next parable is the parable of the pounds. And let's turn to Luke chapter 19, verses 11 to 27. Parable of the pounds, Luke chapter 19, verses 11 to 27. Even here, it would be taking a lot of time if I went through it. So let me paraphrase the story. Now, this parable, we need to know the timing of this parable. Jesus Christ had just been to the house of Zacchaeus, stayed overnight, and next morning he's walking all the way from Jericho to Jerusalem. So there is a crowd accompanying him. The disciples are accompanying him. And as they come walking closer to Jerusalem, now Jesus feels this is time. So let me tell you a parable. Why is he telling that parable? The disciples thought that Jesus Christ was, his kingdom will begin immediately after the cross. So he wants to tell them it's not going to happen that way. Just because I go to the cross, it's not that my kingdom has come and everything is going as the way I desired. So he's telling them a story, a parable. As I told you, even here, if you don't know the background, you won't get the understanding of the parable right. So that's why I always encourage the people in my church to know the Jewish customs, the manners and customs and all the tradition, because the whole Bible has a Jewish setting, unfortunately, and not a Western setting, right? So when you think of a wedding, you can't think of the way it's done in America. You need to think of a Jewish wedding. So here also, Herod had died, and in 4 BC, his son Archelaus decides to go to Caesar. Now, what happens there in Israel? When one person dies, the next person goes. Who is going to be the next king, right? So they have to go to Caesar, make a request, and Caesar would finally sanction, you can go back to this kingdom. I'm giving you these provinces where you are the governor or the king. So Archelaus was ruling a particular place, and it was time that he needed to go to Caesar. But the people were not very happy with him. So when Jesus told this parable, and he spoke about a noble man going off to a far country, immediately the people would have caught it. Oh, he's talking about the governor going to Caesar again to fetch a new kingdom. But when we read it, we don't understand that. So in 4 BC, we find that Archelaus, he goes to Caesar, And there is a Jewish delegation going behind him, around 50 people, to go and tell Caesar that they don't want this man as king, right? They are not happy with him. And it so happens that Archelaus gets another portion of the kingdom. Now let's leave this story behind. Now, how do I relate this story to the second coming? Now, Jesus is saying, my kingdom is not going to start immediately. I have to go back to a far off country. Here, the far off country is heaven. I have to go back to my Father and come back later. But now he's talking to his disciples. Now, after I have gone, the rule is going to be changed. As long as I was with you, you were all bold, you've been loyal, you've been faithful, you've tried your best. But after I go away, my enemy might become the king. Now, after Jesus went away, the Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 4, that the God of the world has blinded the eyes of the unbelievers. Now, who is the God of this world after Jesus went away? Satan. Even when Jesus was there, Satan could have the audacity to offer Jesus all the kingdoms because it was with him, right? And now when Jesus says, after I go to be with the Father, he is asking all the disciples and all the people there, will you be bold when somebody else is ruling you? Will you be loyal? Would you be able to represent my cause? Or you're going to be frightened and you're going to run away? That's why he's talking about his 10 servants who were called and given cities to rule over. Why don't you? In other words, money was given to them. We're not talking about talents. This is not the parable of the talents. Even that also has a similar meaning. So money was given to them, and Jesus is asking them, will you trade in my name openly, knowing that the enemy who is ruling will look at you as the opposition party? And that's why we find one friend is very scared to mention that it belongs to Jesus' side. That's why he goes and he hides it. She doesn't want to speak about Jesus because even to start a trading in terms of a business, you need to open a bank account. And to open a bank account, they'll ask you, whose money? Given by Jesus Christ to this business. So all these details will be revealed. So when Jesus is saying and he's asking his disciples, when I'm not there, when things are going to become tough, when the enemy is ruling, are you willing to be bold for me? Are you willing to be loyal and faithful to me? Will you do that for me? That's what he's asking. He's repeatedly asking, will you do that? Will you be bold for me? Or you will all get frightened and not share the truth. That's you're called to be sharing. That's why you see when the disciples, after Acts chapter 2, they were not the same. Because Jesus had already spoken to them. After I am gone, you will have a lot of suffering. You will have a lot of persecution. But will you stand amidst all that? So that is what this parable teaches. It's not about, what today we are taught, 5 should become 10, 10 should become 20, you need to be smart, and that's not the concept here. It's all about when Jesus is away with the Father, are you willing to be bold, to talk about him, to evangelize, to go to places where you are forbidden and still tell the truth? Right? Are you willing to be a witness? So let me just finish, give you that's the fourth point. Are you willing to witness for me boldly? Now in India, we are all facing a lot of problems. I'm not able to travel like I used to travel before to the north and northeast. Wherever we go, we find there's so much of opposition, and many times we have risked our lives. So the second question is, to all of us, God is asking, we are his disciples, we are his children. Are you willing to risk your life to be loyal to me? So I've given you 5 lessons today so far, what we have gleaned from the 2 parables. Now let me go to the 3rd parable. So finally, we will recap on all that we have learned today. So let's go to the 3rd parable. It's the parable of the rich fool. And you got to come to Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21. The Gospel of Luke chapter 12, verses 16 to 21.
Then he spoke a parable to them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? So he said, I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build greater, and there I will store all my crops and my
That's enough.
goods.
Yeah. So I think from here we can take off to understand what this parable is called. It's called the parable of the rich fool. The parable of the rich fool. Actually, Bible says we shouldn't say the word fool, raka, because that meaning is actually, it means the Greek word is empty-headed. But the title is given in the Bible itself on top, the parable of the rich fool. So I'm not intentionally using the word fool. That's how it's called, parable of the rich fool. Now, this man is actually very blessed. Not all land that we own are so productive. There is fecundity. There is so much of crops there. Here, this man, God has blessed him. He has owned a very nice piece of land where the yield is plenty. Now, he gets so much of his crops, and now he's wondering, what do I do? Even after selling and getting a profit, I have so much of yield with me. So, what do I do with all this? So, he decides, I have to store this up. And he decides to, break down the previous barns and build bigger ones so that he could accommodate all the grains for the future. Now, this man, what God is talking about, he's calling him a fool. Why? He's only concerned about his future in terms of what is required for this world. The food. Or maybe when I grow old, when I retire, I don't have to work hard, number one. I don't have to work hard at an old age, I don't know how my life is going to be. So let me store up all these gains so that I can enjoy my life later with all these grains and with all the money, and use the money for my sustenance in this world. So God is telling him, you're only concerned about this life. You're not worrying about your soul. Your soul is more important than your body. Your body doesn't go to be with the Lord. It's your soul that goes to be with the Lord. So he's asking him, if I need your soul tonight, what's going to happen? All along, you're only concerned about money, materialistic things, and feeding your body. So, very importantly, this teaches, are we just feeding our body? Are we just working hard to earn money for the stomach and all to fulfill the traditions our forefathers have done? Let me just remind you, we are not living at a time they lived. We are waiting to get caught up with Jesus. So we need to be very cautious. And I've spoken to you on subjects like the Bible and the New World Order in detail. What's going to be happening very soon. And I also said the platform has been laid for the one world government. So we need to be really cautious and make sure that we don't do things just for the body. We need to feed us not only with the grains that's required as food for the body, but also with the word of God, because the soul grows only when you feed it with the word of God. That's why Jesus said, man shall not live by bread alone. Enough food you need to have. That's what? The word of God for the soul. That's why. So let's make sure that our soul is fed enough. So I've covered around 7 points so far. And let me go to the last parable. It's called the parable of the waiting servants. This is a small parable, so we can read through it. Right? Luke 12:32 to 40. Parable of the waiting servants.
Do not fear, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom.
Let me just take a break here. Fear not, little flock. So God is just talking to whom is he saying all this? To the church. Okay, it is my pleasure to give you the good kingdom. So don't fear. I will come. In other words, I will come. I'm coming there for you. And then let's go to 34. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be. If your treasure is in the things of the world, that is where your heart will be. So at some point of time, we need to make a shift. This is a paradigm shift. from looking at the things of this world and moving along with the world, running alongside with the world, running for a daily chores, earning money, spending money, and we need to now saving money. All this God is saying, this time it changes, because where your treasure is, there will your heart be. So let's read from 35 again.
Let your waist be girded and your lamps burning. And you yourselves be like men who wait for their master when he will return from the wedding, that when he comes and knocks, they may open to him immediately. Blessed are those servants whom the master, when he comes, will find watching. Assuredly, I say to you that he will gird himself and have them sit down to eat, and will come and serve them. And if he should come in the second watch, or come in the third watch, and find them so, blessed are those servants. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore, you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect.
So even here you see the catchword is delayed. The master is not sure at what time is going to be returning. So when there is a delay, let's not focus. We have already seen Peter writing to us and saying, men will scoff, they'll make fun of all this, there'll be a lot of rivalry, all this will go on. But Peter's saying, I know that the time will come when you will see him coming in the clouds. So here is an assurance for us. It has taken more than 2000 years, but now we are, every time I say this, at the very end of the end times. When I started off the ministry, it was all last days. Then it became end times, but now it is end of the end times. Now, we as his servants, we are as his children, we need to be awake and waiting, because we don't know at what time the master would come. And it doesn't mean that we don't have to go to bed and sleep. This is just a picture, a parable, a story, asking us to be alert, asking us to be watchful, right? Don't miss out on this topic. It's like, no matter what you have to do in terms of doing the will of God, but remember, every day is a prospective day. And as we pass on into this world, we are getting closer to his coming. So let's not forget about the second coming and be alert and be waiting. We don't know what time the master would come. So it says here, he comes in the second watch. So second watch, most of the people would be sleeping, right? So he says, you guys be careful. Don't be, just take it casually. Oh, we'll see when it happens. We'll see when it comes. So that should not be our attitude, irrespective of what our profession is. We know what our calling is, but this is not just calling, this is waiting for the coming of the Lord. So the time is now ripe. So the lesson is, are you truly waiting to receive him? Are you thinking about the coming of Jesus every day? Oh, we're so close to it. I don't know. I haven't done this. I haven't done that. God expects me to set my money in order. God expects me to, to write my property and make sure that everything is settled. I do not know when Jesus is going to come, but I want to do everything, what needs to be done, what God is expecting me to do. I'm telling my children, I want to settle things. Please come next year. I want to settle these things with you, because I don't want to be left behind. If I don't do these things, I might be, because there are certain things that God is expecting me to do at this time, right? Settle things and wait for him. Be ready, truly waiting to receive the master. And the most beautiful thing about this parable, you find, it's not the servant serving the master. It says the master will gird his loins and serve the servants because they were waiting. What does it refer to? Not just the rapture, it's talking about the marriage supper of the Lamb, where Jesus himself will serve all the ones who are raptured. Amazing it is now when you are able to connect. If you just read it as a story, you might miss it. But how beautiful if you can just put all these things together. And now we go to the final advice from Jesus Christ and the final warning. So Luke chapter 21, verses 34 to 36.
But take heed to yourself, lest your hearts be weighed down with carousing, drunkenness, and cares of this life, and that day come on you unexpectedly. For it will come as a snare on all those who dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch therefore, and pray always, that you may be counted worthy to escape all these things that will come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man.
So this is all about the end times when Jesus is talking. We know the end times, if we want to read it in the Gospels, it's in Mark chapter 13, it's in Matthew chapter 24 and 25, and then it's here in Luke chapter 21, right? We know that. So these are the three places Jesus is actually talking in detail about the end times, and he finally goes on to advise. He says, don't be carried away by the things of this world. Do not be weighed down with dissipation, right? But be ready, get ready. The time is coming, and I don't want you to miss the bus. That's what he's trying to tell us, his final advice. Some point of time, the world in us should decrease, and the desire for heaven should increase. So let's go to the final warning, which we find in Mark chapter 13, verses 28 and 29.
Now learn this parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth leaves, you know that summer is near. So you also, when you see these things happening, know that it is near at the doors.
So you see, God is very clear. Jesus is saying, learn from the fig tree, and he's talking about Israel. So you might be living in India, America, any part of the world, but God is saying, look towards Israel. See what is happening there. Keep a constant watch on Israel. You know, there are a lot of people who go to Israel just for tourism, but I know people who go and study there, who want to know what's happening there. So it's not just visiting Israel because the Sea of Galilee is beautiful. It's get to know what is happening there every day. Watch out. You know, that the clue is there. You have to look out at the events that's happening in Israel. So this is what Jesus had to say, give us a final warning. Stay alert to the events happening in Israel. And just for many of you who don't know, I listened to a gentleman called Amir Zirfati. Just he speaks little things about Israel. He's a Jew who speaks from there, and he keeps you updated on all those events. Even like last week or 2 weeks back, when Benjamin Netanyahu said that he's going to be using sensors on people, on children, so that he knows where they are. Right? It's just coming in. They're introducing the vaccine. They are introducing that chip or whatever it is. It's all in the way. Okay. And so let me now just do a recap for those you might have missed by coming late or whatever it is. So let's do the 7 points before we close. Practice holiness every day. Stay pure. Ensure we do the will of God every day and wait for Him till He appears. Third, preparation is an individual discipline. Number 4, are you bold enough to witness and work for Jesus when Satan is ruling the world? 5, are you willing to risk your life to be loyal to Jesus Christ? Are you only concerned about food and materialistic things required for the future of your body, that is this life, or are you thinking about your future life? Have you fed your soul enough with the word of God that you may enter eternity? Are you truly waiting to receive Jesus in the clouds when He appears? Are you still weighed down by the cares of this life or seeking for a better life that is to come? Stay alert and watch out for the events happening in Israel. So this is an answer to that question the gentleman had sent to me. How do I prepare for the rapture? Now I can give you some points on my own, but taking out from the Bible from what Jesus said is the best answer any one of us can get. But since the people didn't receive Him the first time He came, He only spoke in parables. So we need to identify, we need to understand these parables so that we know what to do when we say we are waiting for the coming of the Lord. So get inspired and do what you are required to do. That's my advice. Because I don't know the different people who are here and the calling of God in your life. This is all what we can actually learn today. And God bless you till we meet again. Thank you very much for joining us. See you again. God bless you.
In a busy world surrounded by many distractions, do we take our time to connect with God? The everyday hustle and bustle makes it difficult to connect with Him through His Word. But there is a solution. In Proverbs 2, verses 4 and 5, the writer exhorts us to seek God's wisdom as if they were hidden treasures, so that we understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. Hidden treasures will inspire you to love the Lord deeper and make your faith stronger. With this 366 days devotional book, let us become more Christ-like with each passing day. Read it daily, meditatively, devotionally, spiritually, and prayerfully.
Jesus, Rose of Sharon, the name that brings with it a fragrance. Lord, come and take your revered